I have a real soft spot for the original Apple iMac, and not for the reasons that you might think. Yes, it was the machine that helped save Apple, and yes, it was an innovative design which defined a period at the turn of the millennium. But that's not why I like them. You see, back in 2005, I struck out on my own as a rather naive 21-year-old, and very quickly found out that I hadn't really got the hang of this whole budgeting thing. As a result, I ended up having to rationalise an awful lot of my valuable possessions, including my gaming PC. And in the environment that followed, the only machine I could afford was a slot-load iMac G3. The reason for this was simple. In the time that had passed since the iMac's introduction in 1998, multiple advancements had been made which made it feel somewhat dated. For a start, most people by this point were starting to adopt LCD displays, including Apple, who had introduced the G4 iMac in 2002. The fad of translucent plastics from the late 90s had also passed, and people were much more interested in brushed aluminium or piano black finishes. For that reason, you could basically pick up a G3 iMac for more or less nothing. I'm not kidding, I once won a 400MHz slot load model on eBay for a penny. I spent more in fuel driving to get the thing. That machine was my only accessible device for a couple of years while I found my feet as an adult, and I kept it for a considerable while. In fact, the first 3 videos on this channel were recorded on a mini DV camcorder and edited on that G3 iMac using iMovie. Eventually though, even I had to concede that the humble iMac had outlived its usefulness. But in the years that's followed, I've never passed up an opportunity to pick up another example to have a play with. And in today's video, we'll be saving this rather special example. This rather special example. So what makes this example so special? Well, it's clearly a later model from the tail end of the translucent trend. In fact, this is a snow model from 2001, a facelift example which brought the iMac up to date with Apple's other pure white product of the time, the iPod. This one is the rather special 700MHz version, the fastest G3 iMac that Apple ever produced. From the factory, it came with the 700MHz G3 processor, 256MB of SD RAM, and a 60GB hard disk drive. But as this one's been sold to me as faulty, who knows what condition it's in inside. On the outside, it's not in too bad a condition. A lot of these machines here in the UK were besmirched by imprinted security tagging, as they were often used in schools or businesses. But thankfully, this one only has an electrical safety sticker, which indicates it was at least present in a working environment up until 2010. There's a little bit of dust and grime, but overall it's not in too bad a condition. There's some hazing to the frame that we can lightly take care of, the optical drive and speaker bezels are all present and correct, and the stand and RAM slot cover are present as well. It even came with the original Apple Pro keyboard and mouse that these later iMacs shipped with, and they're a much better design compared to the original compact keyboard and puck mouse. Just because it's in good condition on the outside though, it doesn't mean all is well inside, so it's time to open this machine up and see what's going on. It's ridiculously simple to get inside these machines. You just flip it over and remove 4 screws from the bottom, and the entire base lifts off with no issues. From here, there's a few screws to remove around the outside before the metal RF shield also comes away, and from here we can access the logic board and the drive bays. Straight away I can see a problem here. The optical drive and hard disk are both missing from the machine, and we'll need to at least investigate a replacement hard disk before we can do anything meaningful. Before that though, let's take a good look at the logic board. It actually looks in really good condition. There's no evidence that the pram battery has leaked, and we'll go ahead and swap that out anyway, as replacements are still readily available. We'll also take a quick look at the RAM, and this part number indicates that we only have 128MB of RAM at the moment, so we'll have to do something about that if this machine works. Before we continue, I want to let you know that this video is sponsored by PCBWay.
I use PCBWay for all my PCB needs, and the service I've received has always been quick, cheap, and of a high quality. Simply upload your Gerber files and select the options that suit you, and PCBWay will give you an instant quote. They also have a fantastic project library, many of which include a bill of materials so that, if you want to, PCBWay can source the parts to construct the PCB for you. What's more, the project owners are paid a commission each time you order their design, so it's a great way to support independent creators. Order yours today at PCBWay.com.
The caps on the power board are another common point of failure, but on our example they all look just fine, and it's surprisingly clean in here in general. Part of the reason for this is that the second generation of iMac G3s, that's the ones with the slot load optical drives, were completely passively cooled under order of Steve Jobs. And as there's no fan, there's nothing sucking dust into the machine, so the only way it can get inside is if it drifted in from the top. Of course, that same decision to not have a fan also led to the untimely demise of a percentage of these machines from overheating, but we won't hold that against you, Steve. So off to the internet we go to try and pick up a replacement hard disk and optical drive. The hard disk is easy enough. In theory, any IDE hard disk up to 128GB should be recognised by the BIOS, but by pure chance I was able to pick up an Apple branded Western Digital 60GB drive, which would be the exact same model that this iMac originally shipped with. The optical drives are a bit trickier. Apple used a slot load IDE CD or DVD drive for the second generation of iMac, and they're a common failure point and more difficult to track down online these days. It's the same model that was used in certain G4 iBook models, but with the iMac there's also a separate daughter board which connects the 50-pin ribbon cable to the laptop style IDE interface. The reason the cable is 50 pins and not the standard 40-pin IDE variety is that the extra pins carry the power to the drive, which is why they're only used for the CD drive portion of the cable and not the hard disk portion. Anyway, I digress. After a few weeks of keeping an eye out on eBay, I was able to track down this allegedly working CD drive. Now, this model would have originally shipped with a DVD drive, but these drives were such a common failure point that this is the only compatible drive I could track down in 2024. Or is it? You see, Apple moved to using what they called a combo drive. That's a DVD-ROM and CD rewriter drive to you and me within the later iMac and iBook models. And just like this drive, it's an IDE device. Except Apple in their wisdom put the IDE connector on the other side of the drive, so the adapter that ships with the original drive to provide power and data over a 50-pin ribbon cable just won't work. But thanks to the efforts of fellow YouTuber Dabir, I'm sorry if I've got that wrong, it's relatively easy to fit this square peg into a round hole. The first thing you'll notice is that the two drives are not the same size. The combo drive is thinner, so Dabir has produced a 3D printable bracket that will put the drive at the correct height for the slot load built into the case, while also ensuring it can sit securely using the existing mounting holes in the iMac's drive cage. Next, we need an adapter board which gives us a standard 40-pin IDE interface. That's a simple enough task, these are relatively easy to source online. This converts the laptop-style IDE connector to a traditional 40-pin IDE connector, along with a 4-pin mini Molex connector for power. And with that, we're ready to get our frig-together optical drive setup installed, which means we have to remove this cage to get the drive in. The drive slips in with no issue at all, and then it's just a case of wiggling the drive cage back into place. Okay, so with the drives in, we just need to frig together a splitter cable to provide power to the drive by splitting off the power for the hard disk to a floppy drive style power connector. You can buy these off the shelf, but I had enough old power supplies and adapters laying around that I could put together my own. Then we just need to use a standard IDE cable to replace the shorter ribbon cable the iMac shipped with for the optical drive and hard disk. Now, word to the wise, most IDE cables have a pin blanked off here to help with orientation, but as you can see on the original one there's no blank, so if you're trying this you'll either have to drill out this blank or find a cable that doesn't have the blank over the pins like this one. And with all that installed in a not at all janky way, we can go ahead and reinstall the RAM. I managed to find this additional 256MB stick in my spares pile, so I'll throw that in with the original 128 to give us a total of 384MB. And with that, we're ready to test the machine. So with it sat on its head in a completely safe and secure manner, and with the optical drive looking like it fits in just fine, it's time to power on and see if it even works. Hooray! At least we know it works. For ease of getting us up and running, I went ahead and installed the hard disk in that other iMac, and then went ahead and installed OS X Tiger. And yep, it seems to be booting just fine. Let's go ahead and have a look in About My Mac. And there you have it, ladies and gentlemen, a whopping 700 MHz PowerPC G3, along with 384MB of RAM. If we go ahead and click More Info, we can take a look at ATA devices, and with a bit of luck, we'll see our combo drive. Oh. That's not good. Hold please.
Several days later.
Okay, so it looks like unfortunately this drive has failed. I've spoken with the seller on eBay and he was very apologetic and offered a full refund, but because I don't want to hold this video up, I'm going to go ahead and install the original CD-ROM drive I picked up first time round. I have zero doubt that the adapter that DeBauer has created is 100% fit for purpose. I just had bad luck with the particular drive I bought. But I will keep an eye out on eBay and pick up an appropriate DVD drive when I get the chance to. With that factory CD-ROM drive installed, the machine boots up with no issues, and you can see in About This Mac that we can now see we have an ATAPI CD-ROM drive. Brilliant. Let's test if it can play a CD. Actually, I'm not so sure it's wise to put a CD in upside down, but here we go. Okay, I'm going to assume it's kicking that out purely because it's upside down, so we'll circle back to that later. But now that we know that the machine works, it's ironically time to dismantle it even further. The first step is to get this front bezel off, which always has the potential to be a brown trousers moment with these machines. You see, the subframe underneath is made of a plastic which is incredibly brittle thanks to the inclusion of specific fire retardant chemicals which have aged over time and made the plastic ridiculously fragile. I mean, the first step is to remove these screw covers, and just watch how readily this one shatters. It's obscene. These subframes can now be replaced thanks to a Kickstarter campaign by Mac Effects, but I'm hoping I can just preserve this one as best I can. With those screw covers off, it's clear that I'm not the first person in this machine. There are bits of degraded plastic and some clear gaps aligning with the bottom of the monitor. Still, at least the next part doesn't involve the subframe. We now need to gently pry off the outer shiny bezel from the top cover, and we can afford to be a bit more ruthless here. And eventually the cover gives way. Underneath, our inner bezel doesn't actually look too bad. I've seen these literally crumble before, but ours will just benefit from a clean as long as I'm not too rough with it. So now I need to pry out yet more screw covers, and really it's a case of just being as gentle as you can. I'm actually amazed I got both of these out without shattering them. Next we need to remove the two screws here at the top, and we need to be incredibly careful given that these screw through that brittle subframe. Deep breaths, everyone. Lastly, we've got some screws to remove from the underside, and these are comparatively easy given that they screw into more malleable plastics underneath. And then we're on to the breaking point for this machine, or rather, hopefully not. We need to push down on the outer shell to separate it from that inner bezel. Wish me luck. Well, that wasn't too bad, and now we're in a position where we can begin cleaning. Well, that's looking lots better. To get this machine up to a mirror shine, I used a buffing pad on a drill and some car polishing compound to get it looking as good as it possibly could, and it shows. It's not often you get to see these machines as shiny as they were back at the turn of the millennium, but it really does show just how meaningful Johnny Ive's designs were. So what will we do with such a pretty machine? Well, first off, let's check if that CD-ROM drive actually works now that the machine is the right way up. Yep, okay, that's looking good. We can also connect the machine to the internet via the built-in 100 megabits per second Ethernet controller, though we're not going to be able to do much with the ancient Safari browser included. Even getting Google to load is like revisiting the dial-up days of internet access. What I can do though is access my home server's music collection, and we can go ahead and play my channel jingle circa 2010. It's quite neat that I can browse my entire music library, though I can feel some of you at the back judging me as I do. Not like you're so perfect. To be fair though, there's not much else we can do with this machine at present. But if you make sure you're subscribed to my second channel, TME Bytes, then you'll hopefully see me playing around with some weird and wonderful OSs on this machine in the not too distant future. For now though, that's where we'll leave this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, there is a button explicitly for that. And if you're a fan of this sort of content, then I'd love if you consider subscribing to my channel as well via the button on screen now. Other than that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.